Today is Saturday. Holy Saturday was a day of silence, stillness, and sorrow. Jesus lays lifeless in the tomb. To the disciples, hope seemed buried, but while the world waited, God was still working. Holy Saturday teaches us that when heaven seems silent, our Redeemer is still moving behind the scenes. In fact, if we're being honest, some of the most difficult days we face are in the in-between seasons, the waiting seasons, the moment between prayer and answer, between promise and fulfillment, between Good Friday's pain and Resurrection Sunday's breakthrough. And Holy Saturday, we must get this on Holy Saturday. Holy Saturday is that in-between day. Holy Saturday is that in-between day. On Good Friday, Jesus was crucified. The sky turned black. The veil was torn. The earth quaked, and it was the most tragic and world-altering day in all of human history. On Easter Sunday, Jesus rose from the dead in victorious victory. Resurrection power was put on really great display. But on Saturday, there was silence. No miracles. No signs. No words from Jesus. No angels visible. Just silence and sorrow. Have you ever lived through a Saturday season? A time when heaven seemed quiet, prayers go up unanswered, and the tomb still appears sealed? If so, you're not alone. The disciples did too. But I want to remind you, God does some of his most powerful work in the silence. Just because you can't see him does not mean he is not moving. And so today, let's look at what happened on Holy Saturday and what it teaches us about trusting God in the quiet. So what happened? Jesus is buried in a sealed tomb, right? Matthew chapter 27, verse 59 and 60 says it like this: when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and he laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock, and he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. You see, after Jesus died, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the Sanhedrin and the secret follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for his body. Alongside Nicodemus, the same man who had visited Jesus by night, they wrapped Jesus reverently and carefully in burial clothes and with spices, as they did in that day, as a sign of honoring the dead. Then they placed him in a new tomb, carved out of a side of a hill, carved out of rock. And they rolled a massive stone in front of it, and to anybody watching, it looked final. To the religious leaders, the threat was eliminated. It was over. To the Roman authorities, the rebellion was crushed. To the disciple, their Messiah, their rabbi, their teacher, their friend was gone. And all of their hopes were buried along with Jesus. Yet I need to tell you that even in this moment fulfilled prophecy. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 9 says, "And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death." You see, prophecy was being fulfilled even in the stillness of a sealed tomb. We see that the tomb is guarded and it's sealed. Matthew chapter 27, verse 65 and 66. Pilate said to him, You have a guard. Go your way. Make it as secure as you know how. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. Religious leaders remembered that Jesus had proclaimed that he would rise again after 3 days. And so they ironically took more steps to confirm his resurrection than his own disciples did. Isn't that funny? They sealed the tomb with an official Roman seal, a symbol of authority and warning, and they stationed guards there to prevent anyone from faking a resurrection. They didn't want the disciples to come and steal his body. And so from a human perspective, this was the end. To the religious leaders, this was the end. To the disciples, this was the end. To the people that watched him die on that horrible cross, this was the end. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a dream, a relationship, a calling, or a hope that felt like it had been rolled into a tomb and sealed shut? The enemy may have placed a seal over your purpose, but that does not mean God isn't preparing something greater behind that stone, behind that grave. Heaven is still working. On the surface, it was quiet. In the unseen realm, Jesus was fulfilling his redemptive mission beyond what human eyes could ever witness. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18 and 19 says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the just for the unjust, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom he also went and preached to the spirits in prison." You see, while Jesus' body lay in the tomb, his spirit was not idle. He descended into the realm of the dead to proclaim his victory. This was not a message of repentance. It was a declaration. The price has been paid. The enemy is defeated. Colossians chapter 2, verse 15. Having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them. What looked like Jesus losing was Jesus winning. And what looked like silence was a proclamation of triumph. So we see now the disciples rest and they weep in silence. Luke chapter 23, verse 56, "And when they returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment." The women prepared burial spices, but couldn't return to the tomb because it was the Sabbath. And the ancient day of rest now became a day of immense sorrow. Imagine what that Saturday Sabbath was like. Every laugh was silenced by grief. Every prayer hanging unanswered. And every one of their hopes seemed buried. Have you ever had a Sabbath where sorrow suffocated your praise? That's exactly right where the disciples were. They were sitting in the tension between a crucified Friday and their very unknown future. I can relate to that. Can you? You need to understand some lessons from Holy Saturday. Number one, God's silence is not his absence. Just because God is quiet doesn't mean that he's gone. He is always working, even when you cannot see the evidence. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and of good courage. For the Lord your God, he is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Even in the grave, Christ was fulfilling his Father's will. And what appeared to be an activity was out of divine orchestration. Jesus was not sleeping. He was securing the victory. The second thing we need to learn from this Holy Saturday is waiting is part of God's will. We often want Sunday's resurrection without Saturday's waiting. But waiting season, can I tell you, listen to me now, waiting seasons are a part of God's process. God builds faith in us in the waiting. God refines character in the silence. God cultivates trust even when we feel all alone. Psalm 27, verse 14, wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. I also need to tell you God's promises do not expire in the tomb. And then the third thing we need to learn is what looks like the end is not the end. Because to everybody, Saturday looked like the story was over. But what seemed dead was only planted, not buried. What seemed dead was only planted, not buried. And there's a difference between a grave and a garden. And early the next morning, God would show up in resurrection power. John chapter 11, verse 25, he said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. I need to tell you, sometimes when everything seems over, that's when God is setting up a miracle. So here it is. We need to learn on this Saturday how to live in the tension of Saturday. Holy Saturday teaches us how to wait. And you may be living in a Saturday season today, praying for a miracle, grieving a loss, waiting for resurrection. It's the space where faith, it's tested. The silence is heavy, and the outcome is unknown. But remember, God always finishes what he starts. Friday may bring death. Sunday brings resurrection. So hold on. Wait in the tension. Trust in the silence. Because Holy Saturday never gets the final word. Resurrection is on the schedule. And as the dawn began to rise on Sunday, heaven was preparing the stone to be rolled away. And the same God who raised Jesus is still at work in your waiting. So until then, rest in this promise. Your silence is not a sentence. God is still moving, and Sunday is coming.